Hello, friend. Myself Sanjeev Dwivedi, and on behalf of Vidyalankar Institute of Technology, I welcome you all in this Java session. In this session, we are going to talk about vector class and wrapper classes. Now, what is vector? Vector is a collection, unlike array. Now, what do you mean by that? When we create an array. The first disadvantage that we have in array is it is static in nature. It cannot grow and cannot shrink. Second, it store element of same type only. And if it is an array of object, it will store object of that same class or and its subclass. Correct. So if I wish to store objects of different class together, and that too with dynamic in nature, means it should be able to grow and shrink dynamically, then one such class is vector class. It is a class that belongs to util package. So it is in java.util package. So the vector class implements a growable array of object. It behaves like an array. Vector implements a dynamic array that can grow and shrink as required. Like an array, it can contain component that can be indexed, that can be accessed using index. Means like in array, the elements are stored at index position 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Even in vector also, they are stored at index position 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. It is similar to array list. We will see array list in future. But vector is synchronized and hence and has legacy method. Now, when I say synchronized, it means that the multiple thread cannot make changes at a time. Only one thread can access it at a time. So we will see it in due course. Vector class inherits abstract list and it implements a list interface. We will study it interface in due course. Now, vector constructor. Now, what if at the time of creating vector object, I'm not passing anything. If at the time of creating vector object, I'm not passing anything. See, so it will call the default constructor. Now, what happens with default constructor? It creates a vector with default initial size 10. You know how vector behaves? It's like suppose I'm going to organize a rally on a ground. So initially I'll keep 10 chair. Okay. So it's like vector. Vector initially arranges memory for 10 objects. Now, if we have if first person come and sits on the chair, so we have one chair occupied, 9 chair unoccupied. The size is 1, but the capacity is still 10. So this 10 initially that we are talking about 10 chairs, there it is the capacity. So the size is 1, capacity is still 10. Second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So we have 10 persons sitting on 10 chair. So size is 10, capacity is 10. Now if 11th person comes, my capacity is fully utilized. I will decide that by every time my capacity is finished, I will increment it by, let's say I'll double it. So every time 11th person come, I'll double it. So now I'll have 10 more chair arranged. So now my capacity will be 20. And if 21st person come, I will double my capacity. So I'll arrange more 20 chairs. So this is default arrangement. It will arrange a memory for 10 objects. And if it finishes, if it is completely utilized, then the capacity is doubled. Now, if this what happens in case of default constructor. Now, if at the time of creating vector, I'm specifying size, let's say 4. So it will create a vector with initial capacity 4. And once that capacity is reached, it will double it. So it will be 8, then 16, then 32, and so on. Now, if we don't want it to double, then we will specify the size as well as increment value. So if I say 4, 2, so it's like initial capacity 4. And every time that capacity is reached, it will increment it by 2. And last, we can create a collection. Like I can create an array. Like I can create an array of object of class A equals to new A5. And I can pass this array to the vector so that it will create a vector with the size of the size equal to number of element present in the collection. And at the same time, it will initialize my vector with those objects which are present in the collection. So when it comes to vector, if I'm not specifying anything, default constructor, it will create a vector with capacity 10, increment it by double. If I'm only specifying the size, it will create a vector of this size and will be doubled once it is reached. If I am specifying size as well as increment value, then it will create a vector of initial size as capacity, and it will increment by the specified amount. I can also pass a collection to the vector, so that vector is created and initialized with the element of the connection. Now, vector has provided me with some methods. Now, when it comes to vector, methods like add element, it will add element in the vector object. Capacity will return the current capacity of it. It will return the current capacity of the vector. Clear, it will remove all the elements from vector. Contains. Now, if I suppose in my vector I stored object a1 and I want to check whether the object a1 is present or not, then I can specify, I can identify it using contains method, like vector v dot contains a1. So if object a1 is present, it will return true, else it will return false. Copy into, if I want to copy the content of vector into an array, so we can make use of copy into, and that, see, general form is array of object, because vector can store objects of different class. Element at, it will return the element at specified index position in vector. Vector is a collection, so we can have element of different objects stored at respective positions. Now, equals, it will compare one vector object with another vector object. Index of, it will return the index of first occurrence of the object that we desire in the vector. Insert element. Now, add element will add the new object at the end of the vector. Insert element will insert that object at specified index position. Remove element will specify the object that I have identified. If I say v dot remove element a1, it will remove object a1 in the vector. But if I specify index v dot remove element 5, it will remove the object at index position 5 in the vector. And this is how we compare vector and array. Vector can grow and shrink dynamically, array cannot. Vector can store dynamic objects, so primitive data types. Array can store primitive data types. Vector is found in java.util package. Array is found in java.lang. It can store elements of different type. Array cannot. And it provides, vector comes with a lot of methods for accessing the members of the vectors. Array, we do not have such methods. How do we create vector object? Vector object name equal to new vector. And here it's like data type, array name, new data type. This is example, vector v1 new vector and int array. Now here when we created vector v1 equal to new vector, it's default constructor. So it will create a vector with initial capacity 10, and that will be the, and every time the capacity will be doubled once it is reached. So this is about array and vector. Now one interesting thing is, in vector now there is one disadvantage. We cannot store primitive data type values. So if I want to store int x in vector, it won't be stored. So I need to convert that integer into object, and then I can assign it to vector. Now for every data type here, Java provides you wrapper classes. So you can wrap those values into, vector and can assign it to, can wrap those values into object and can assign into vector. So object like vector cannot help handle primitive data type. I cannot store values in it. Wrapper classes are used to convert primitive data types into object. So for every data type like Boolean, we have class. For int, we have integer class. For char, we have character class. For float, we have float class. And we have some method. The first is to convert integer number to string. So if I'm having some integer value I want to convert it into strings. I can directly write string str is integer dot toString. So toString is a method that converts any number into a string object. And if I want to convert string object back to number, so if I integer dot toString I converts I value into string, integer dot parse int will convert back to integer. Similarly, you could have done with float. So if I have float value, I would write float dot toString I. If I is a float value, if it is a character value, double value, then double dot toString and then value. And similarly, if I want to convert string to float, it will be here it will be float dot parse float. Double, it will be double dot parse double, and so on. Now, suppose I want to convert 10 into integer object. So integer is a class. Integer x equal to new integer 10. 10 is a primitive integer value. Using the integer class constructor, I converted into integer object x. So now 10, which is an integer value, we have corresponding integer object x. Now I want to extract the value back. So I have to use the method type value. So x is an integer object. X dot int value will return me the integer value. So here y will get initialized with 10. So this is the method of wrapper class using which we converted the integer object or number object to corresponding numbers. For double, we'll write double value. For float, we'll write float value, and so on. So this was about wrapper classes, vector, comparison with array. For further details, you can refer complete reference Herbert Schild. Thank you very much.